This is Miss Jennifer Roberts. She's a third grade teacher at Faith Christian School. Thank you for letting me come to your classroom. I'm just going to ask you a few questions about what you do and the technology you use in your classroom.
Okay.
So the first question is, what are some ways that you integrate technology in the school curriculum?
Okay. Now, I've been teaching for 30 years, and but there was a period of time about 10 years ago that I left the classroom and I worked with the Alabama Reading Initiative, and the team that I worked on was in Birmingham. And then when I finished working with them, I came back to Faith Christian School. I came here for the first time and taught third grade. Again, I had taught third grade in the past, but so I started teaching third grade again 3 years ago. So one thing that I was looking for, I knew I was going to need to help to develop my kids' reading fluency. And years ago, I used a reading station with cassette tapes and, your little headphones, and those are kind of obsolete now. So I was wondering how I was going to get the same thing in my classroom. So I started researching, and I found Epic online. And Epic is free for teachers.
Okay.
And on Epic, it just supports my reading classroom, because every week in my reading class we have a theme, and it's introduced by a question, and they're all back here. You can see this.
Okay.
And so, like, for instance, last week's question was, how do teams work together? And it was talking about rescue teams. Our story that we read was on wildfires. So I went to Epic and I found a bunch of books on that topic. And I have set up, all of my kids have an account on Epic. And so I can just email them these books.
Okay.
And that's one of their stations that they go to throughout the week, is they read these books, and it just helps to build their background in reading.
Okay. I noticed when we were talking before that we did this interview, you talked about how you did QR codes.
Mm-hmm.
How did you use the QR codes in your
Well, I've used QR codes in a web quest before.
Okay.
Like just recently, we had Dr. Seuss Week, and so I wanted them to get some biographical information on Dr. Seuss.
Okay.
And so I gave them little cards. Everybody had their own iPad, and they had different cards, and they would rotate the cards. And there would be a question, and they would take a picture of that QR code, and it would take them to the place on the web where they could read a paragraph and find the answer to their question. And we've also used it, I've made an Escape the Classroom game, and so we've used it in that way too, where they'll take a picture of the code, and that'll give them the next clue to kind of try to figure out how to escape.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. Do you use Kahoot or any other apps?
I do. I use Kahoots to, at the end of our science and social studies units, I have an account there as well.
Okay.
And I'll go in and make up some review questions, and then every student again has their own iPad, and so they, there's a code that comes up on Kahoot, and they put the code in their iPad that lets them have access to that little quiz. And then it just runs through the questions, and it's like multiple choice or true false.
Okay.
And they just choose the answer, and it'll come up whether they're right or not. It's kind of like a little game show in a way,
Okay, yeah.
Another thing that I've been doing for the past 3 years here is with my science curriculum, I was assigned the children a research project.
Okay.
And in the computer lab, they are designing their own PowerPoint. So there's just things that I've come up with, like they have to tell what kind of animal is. Is it a mammal? Is it a reptile? Is it a bird? They have to tell whether it's a vertebrate, invertebrate. They have to tell about the food chain, the habitat. So they do that research down in the computer lab, and those are the slides for their PowerPoint. And then they will present this to the whole class when they finish with their PowerPoint.
That's cool. How did you differentiate any of these apps?
Well, with Epic, you can get books on different levels, for one thing.
Okay.
And then also they can read the book to themselves, or they can choose a book that is it's called a read to me book.
Okay.
And the words are in front of them, but it's being read to them.
Okay.
So they're not that, stumbling block can be taken away. They can just focus on the subject or the topic, but it also helps to develop their fluency and their vocabulary too.
Okay. That's cool. So how do you see technology changing in education?
There's just so many ways it could change, but one thing that I've heard about people using here recently are those artificial intelligence devices like Alexa, and then here recently I've heard about Albert Einstein where they can just ask it science questions.
Okay, that's cool.
And when I used to teach science in middle school, and I was always interested in doing like a flipped classroom where the kids would do some of the work at home, and then when they came back to the classroom, then you know, we could do all the fun stuff, all the hands-on activities, all the experiments and things like that. But the problem with that is that all kids don't have access to the technology at home.
Right.
You know, so I don't know how you overcome that. I also see where, you know, in the future, I could see where classrooms really become obsolete, and the kids are at home, you know, signing into a website and, you know, using their own dashboard to figure out what they have to do that day and looking at the progress they're
Right.
making. You have teachers on the other side of that somewhere, but it's not the traditional classroom.
Like an online class.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for letting me come to your classroom and
Sure.
just ask you questions.
All right, well, thank you.